The more things change, the more they stay the same. Hey, y'all, Gravity. Any day above ground, live it. I hope you're having a fantastic start to your Tuesday. For some reason, I thought today was Wednesday, but, such is life. We got to look at this because I got tagged in a clip on X yesterday with this Glenn Lowry person, or Loury. He talked to Breonna Joy Gray because he got fired from the Manhattan Institute. And I said, I didn't even have an inkling to watch this. I was like, okay, another bootleg got kicked out of the deal. So whatever. And I kept seeing some comments, and it sparked my interest. So we're going to watch it together. That's what we're going to do this morning before I got to go to work. So this is almost 30 minutes. So, because I'm not going to go get the full, I don't think she put out the audio of the podcast. And I know it's probably a longer conversation. Maybe when she drops it, I'll listen to it. If anything in there is of substance, maybe I'll play it one day. But I want to see what he said, because as you see the title, it says Black conservative reconsiders race after being canceled for Palestine support. So let's look.
I'm not going to let these people, defenders of Israel, tell me that I can't have that feeling, that I can't see with sympathy the consequences of the domination of these people. I'm talking about the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. You use the settler colonialism.
Fair use, by the way, fair use.
Postmodernism. Well, it may or may not apply in every detail to the historical facts of Palestine and Israel, but it's definitely not irrelevant. You say apartheid. This is not apartheid. This is the administration of a necessary occupation where this, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, okay, Jimmy Carter. I got that from Jimmy Carter. I got that from Bethlehem. I got that from the Supreme Court. I mean, but if you say don't use it, I won't use it. But it does have apartheid. Like,
all right, let's get to the show.
Earlier this year, when my relationship with the Manhattan Institute on, but it does have apartheid.
Damn.
Doesn't it? The separation of my relationship with the Manhattan Institute unfolded over months and terminated earlier this year. When they decided that they didn't want to renew our relationship with me as a distinguished senior fellow who's being compensated and being invited to undertake initiatives in the context of the Manhattan Institute, they decided they didn't want to continue to do that. But that had an earlier episode where they elected not to continue to sponsor the Blend Show, my podcast, which they had been lavishly and generously, for which I was very grateful, helping me to support a team, that I relied on to produce the podcast, a very excellent producer and a very excellent editor and writer. And I'm still working with my team, but I'm doing so on a thinner margin, a much thinner margin than I had been doing when I had my support. So yeah, that happened, but it didn't happen yesterday. It's just that I decided I wasn't going to make a big deal out of it. But then after a while, I thought, well, probably I should explain to my followers.
Good morning to the room.
They no longer see me presenting the show as sponsored by the Manhattan Institute, and maybe I should appeal to my supporters that, independent voice, if you really appreciate the role that I'm trying to play in American public life, then, I need your support now more than ever. And so the opportunity, I don't want to name names, but some people I know who know some people I know who know Tucker said, you have to go on Tucker. And I had done an interview.
Tucker. Okay, so we're already got a red flag. They told you to go see Tucker Carlson. Okay. But this is his missive. Because, he wants to stay in them conservative circles. He can't just be an independent Black conservative. Still got to run around there, but okay. Go ahead, sir.
With Tucker a few years ago on a different subject altogether, my life and my work and being a Black conservative and whatnot. Tucker was interested in that, so I knew him casually. But he reached out, Tucker did, and asked me if I wanted to talk about this, and I decided I'd use that as the occasion to make news.
Well, news you made, indeed. So just to set this up a little bit, can you explain to the audience what the Manhattan Institute is, sort of what the politics of it are, and what they do?
The Manhattan Institute is a well-funded and very active, right-of-center, urban-focused, domestic policy-intensive think tank located in New York City.
Urban.
They publish a journal called the City Journal. They have writers who contributed to the City Journal, like people like Heather McDonald and Christopher Rufo and many others. And I said, what Heather? They are players in the policy world, in talking about housing, talking about education, talking about crime, policing, and whatnot. Right of center, anti-DEI would be one of the themes, but there are many. They're smart, they're nimble, and they used to be my home. You know, I had thought stepping down from Brown, going to emeritus status, I was going to kind of refocus my institutional footprint in the policy world at the Manhattan Institute, and I had thought that I had cultivated relationships with people, including the staff there. The president, Rahman Salam, was someone who I value, whose friendship I value. And I had made appearances at, phony dinners at the Harvard Club in New York City with the board of trustees, who are an estimable group of financiers and philanthropists and well-heeled. My persona was a black conservative bad boy prepared to call the woke folk to account, like you, being against affirmative action and reparations and, whatnot.
Woke folk, reparations. This should be interesting.
Being against affirmative action and reparations and, whatnot, and realizing that George Floyd was probably not a person around whom you want to build an epic narrative of African-American striving and, many other things that you and I will disagree about, I'm sure. But I was that guy, I was going to be that voice. I was the voice that, called out the looting is okay BS back in 2020. Again, you and I are not going to agree about all these things. And I was going to sort of plant my flag with the Manhattan Institute, which you asked me to describe, and I think I've done an adequate job of doing so. I was going to be a player in the right of center policy world, coming not from the university, but from a think tank. And I was going to...
A player on the right of center playfield. Now, for those who don't know who this is, he is a professor of social sciences at Brown. So, just to give you a little bit of background, he trying it. I see what he's doing. Because now that he got kicked out, he lost his contract. Now he trying to go into the center.
I'll be my home. Until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't. So, I'm trying to resist Professor being a brat right now.
I know what you're going to say.
And being like, well, I told you those people weren't your friends. I told you those are bad fellows. But I'm
Be a brat. Be a brat.
I'm going to resist. At least I'm going to try to hold it off for at least like 20 minutes of this podcast and just ask you on your own terms, sort of how you responded to this. So you're telling me that these are people with whom you've had good professional and personal relationships and with whom you are ideologically aligned. And you've also said this is a think tank or an institute that focuses mostly on domestic urban politics. So the question I have is, were you surprised when the issue of an international conflict between two countries that, of course, has implications given America's role in funding Israel, but is fundamentally an international, non-domestic conflict, was something that was such a red line and that caused people with whom you had these professional and personal relationships and so much simpatico to respond to you in what seems like a kind of cursory and quick fashion?
Was I surprised? Well, yeah, I was, and I shouldn't have been.
Why do you say you shouldn't have been?
Well, I mean...
Are you going to say it?
Look, it didn't happen all in one day.
Uh-huh.
Back in January of 2024, a few months after October 7th,
right.
And I should say that I denounced the violence perpetrated by Hamas in southern Israel on October 7th. I think I want to get that on the record. I have no grief for it whatsoever. It was a whole lot of adjectives that we could run down if we had the time. It was a bad thing. I have no justification or argument for it. It's not justified by, and then we can go into the history and there'll be different points of view, but that history doesn't justify what was done. I'm against it. Okay, but I had Omar Barkov, the historian, colleague of mine. I've known him for 20 years. He's a professor of history here at Brown University. We've served on high-level university committees under the leadership of Ruth Simmons when she was here as president. Omar and I together. I know him well. I know he writes books about cities in Eastern Europe whose Jewish populations were decimated by the Nazis, and he knows a lot about the history of the Holocaust.
He's Israeli himself, isn't he? Israeli American?
Yeah, he's Israeli, right. And he thinks, or thought at that time, this is January of 2024, months after October 7th, but well into the Israeli response, incursion of the Gaza bombardment. And he thought it bordered on genocide, and he basically said so. He's a student of genocide. He thought it bordered on genocide. He ran down the International Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, United Nations, whatever. And I had him on the show. And I got a note from the staff saying, "Oh, we're sponsoring the Grift, but we don't want to be mentioned when you give credits for that particular episode." That was in January. I mean, nothing else. No finger wag, no reprimand. Just we like to dissociate ourselves from that episode. It's okay, and we did. Now,
There's a what?
A smart person with their finger
How'd
in
you
the
get a
wind
hornet in here?
will say, I touched on the third rail. People are sensitive about that. Let me look at who's on the board, and let me look at what their other philanthropic activities are. Let me, and then let me take the smart, politically astute, savvy player posture in this whole situation. But I didn't do that. I was naive. I just went along. I said, okay, these are my buddies. They didn't want that episode. It's no big deal. And some months went by, and then Ta-Nehisi Coates comes out with this book, The Message. And I read the book. The day after it arrives from Amazon. I'm sorry, y'all. I just wanted to hear what Ta-Nehisi was going to say. I didn't know he was writing about Israel. I didn't know what was in the book. I just knew that Ta-Nehisi had a book about writing. 4 essays, one of them an open letter to his students, one of them about going to synagogue, one of them about going to some book banner thing in South Carolina, and one of them about going to the West Bank. And I read the book. And me and John McWhorter, who I've talked with regularly at my podcast, got into a conversation about, we just agreed about the book. He thought, Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's got his head up his stuff. And I thought, Ta-Nehisi Coates, he's showing himself to be a pretty interesting dude. And I said that.
And why is that? Because you've been critical of Coates in the past.
Yeah, and I'm not taking it back that essay that made him famous on reparations again. You and I disagree, right? I know we disagree. I'm not a fan of reparations. We could go into it, but I think...
I wrote a critical piece, a critical response to that essay in New York Magazine for different reasons than you, to be clear. But I have also, I respect him, and I would even go as far as saying I really like him. But I have had very strong disagreements with him politically. But I only raised that to say that I'm sorry?
No, I was going to say duly noted, and I was going to go on and say I didn't like Between the World and Me either, and I was going to take a minute to say why, but I don't need to do that.
Sure, but I was just saying to give you the credibility that you certainly weren't someone who was an obsequious Ta-Nehisi Coates lover.
Correct.
When you decided to talk about this book on your
but first of all, that book, including the chapter on his visit to West Bank, but the whole book is just brilliantly written. It's just eloquent and lyrical, and it's really powerful art. The craft of writing that book. What he has to say to students about the politics of writing, about the importance of clarity and so on in your writing, and vividness and specific, and whatnot. His reflection on going to synagogue was full of such nuance in my mind. I mean, he's aware of the fact that there's a fictive dimension to his Africanness. He's an African American. He's a descendant of slaves. The slaves were imported from Africa across the Atlantic Ocean, but that was many generations ago. And his relationship to synagogue, to Africa, to Mother Africa, quote unquote, is fraught.
You didn't have to do this. You could have just said Mother Africa and kept it moving. Damn.
It's fertile ground for a serious novelist or critic to raise a lot of different questions. And he raises questions there about that thing. And his encounter with those book banners in South Carolina, anyway, I could go on. The book was very well written and very well. So I'm reading this book and I'm saying, damn, it's really good. And then I get to the chapter on the West Bank. And I read it, and I think, again, the craft, powerful. The humanity. I mean, he is in touch with the humanity of the Palestinians. That's really very important. The call to moral witness. You're an African American. You're a descendant of Frederick Douglass and W.B. Du Bois and so forth and so on. You are an inheritor of liberation struggle, of freedom struggle. You are among the subaltern until you kind of are not, because we are not any longer subaltern, I would say, but. You're not siding with your nose pressed against the candy store window. You know what domination is. You know what white supremacy is. Now, is what's going on in the West Bank white supremacy? No, I'm not saying that. Is it domination? Sure. Yeah, it is. And when Coates, I think of many scenes. One scene is he's looking at the sunlight glinting off of the reflector shades of Centurion-type guards at a checkpoint. And he's thinking about a Georgia sheriff in 1958 enforcing a segregation order with the, same kind of smear. And there's a moment of recognition, and I don't mean to go on too long about this, but I'm just saying, he's a black man. I'm a black man. He ventures into this thicket. I've been to Israel on many occasions, half dozen occasions over the course of the last 50 years. And he comes back and he reflects on it. in the 21st century, after the liberation of South Africa, after the triumph of anti-racism as a normative principle in global affairs. And he has something to say. And I thought, A, you brave dude, because you're walking into a maelstrom. But I thought, B, you're a writer. You're a black writer. I'm a writer, kind of. I'm definitely a black kind of writer. What am I about? I see what you're about. What am I? I was shaken by that book. I was made to ask myself some questions about that book. And these questions are all the more powerful in my mind, in my observing that my conversation partner, John Martin McWhorter, God love him, is not willing to ask these questions about himself. And, what kind of black writers are we now? And now I'm not necessarily commenting on the Middle East. I'm commenting on a kind of fidelity and integrity within the intellectual life of a black man in 21st century.
It's sad that you have to ask about your integrity in the 21st century. You this old. But maybe you can teach the younger coon to have some integrity. But they're so lost in the sauce now, they're on the wave of victimhood. Even though they tried to preach to people years ago not to be victims.
Civilization. And I'm not going to let these people, defenders of Israel, tell me that I can't have that feeling. That I can't see with sympathy the consequences of the domination of these people. I'm talking about the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. You use the settler colonialism analogy, and that's trivial, woke postmodernism. Well, it may or may not apply in every detail to the historical facts of Palestine and Israel, but it's definitely not irrelevant. You say apartheid. This is not apartheid. This is the administration of a necessary occupation where blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, okay, Jimmy Carter. I got that from Jimmy Carter. I got that from Beth Stelm. I got that from the criminal court. I mean, but if you say don't use it, I won't use it. But it does have apartheid-like features, doesn't it? So you say South Africa is irrelevant, that the world opinion, the UN General Assembly and whatnot. And I say, look, I descend from people who sought succor and cover under the global agreement about human decency and equality, of which the South African relevance to this case is one such. Don't tell me I can't do that. What kind of intellectual, what kind of black intellectual would I be if I let you tell me that I couldn't do that? Oh, so now you're going to go to how phony it is for me to put myself forward as a black intellectual because I've essentialized identity. Who exactly is essentializing identity in this argument? You mean to say Jewish identity is not as problematic as is black identity, and some of the same questions of essentialization of socialism, chauvinism could be raised against it? You call me the universalist ground, but you retreat behind a partisan ethnic bunker? So, Brianna, let me say it again. What Hamas did on October 7, 2023 was horrific, despicable. But it does not justify the destruction of 2 million people. And if I were to watch that unfold before my very eyes and not say so, what kind of human being, let alone black intellectual, would I be? That's how I feel about it.
Professor, it's kind of emotional and thrilling and exciting and confounding to hear you wrestle with what feels like with 100% at the heart of not just this issue, the Israel-Palestine issue, but also what's been animating a lot of other prongs of discourse over the past years. I recently was engaging with Norm Finkelstein, who's another one of these sort of iconoclasts who is very pro-Palestine. He's one of the preeminent, perhaps the preeminent scholar and historian on Gaza, and also has been a leader in criticizing excesses, or what he described as excesses of sort of the woke left and identity politics and the like. And while I've made my own critiques of those things, we have gone back and forth about whether or not, in some instances, he's taken the criticisms too far, in my view, and also whether the current moment of protests in support of Palestine and crackdowns on university campuses against them, the retrenchment of free speech principles from many figures on the right who purported to value those principles, the use of what I would...
I love you, Brianna, but you just waffling on. I need to go. But I'm going to give y'all a nice little nice little segue. We gonna listen to this here because he did talk to
And I
Tucker.
said, but
Oh,
has been
Tuck Tuck.
proceeding there.
He talked to Tuck Tuck. So y'all will be very interested in what he said about civil rights with Tuck Tuck and what Tuck Tuck said about civil rights. So we're gonna go here. Maybe this will be better. I fuck with Brianna Joy Gray, but she was waffling on. I was about to Jigglypuff her. So we're gonna go on. No disrespect to you, Brianna, but I don't want my audience needs to go to work today. I don't need them sleeping in the car. So let's go.
Some sympathy for it.
So what, I mean, it's a very complex subject and you've obviously lived in the middle of it for a long time, but what is the verdict? Was all of that good for African Americans or not, or probably a mix of both, but like, how would you describe what we know now?
Well, if you were to pick up a typical work wanted ad page in 1960 in a major American city, you would see explicit kind of no blacks need apply type language. If you were to look at controlling for the skills that people had, the anticipated earnings of a worker, you would see that their being African American was a negative, and it was a non-trivial negative in 1960. If you were to look at the way the housing market operated, or at the allocation of public educational resources, you would see significant discriminatory barriers that impeded African American development of their skills and participation in the society, and all of that has changed. So that's, I think, for the good, without any question. That having changed, let's call it the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the change in the ethos of the country with the rise of the civil rights movement and so on, that having changed, the question becomes, we get to 1970, let's say, the question becomes what next? And there, I think the story is less clear, and I think that there are developments that are very distressing. I think there's a wonderful book that I want to plug here called The World of Patience Gromes, Gromes, by a man called Scott Davis. Patience Gromes is a woman born in the late 19th century, like 1890 or something like that, who to a yeoman farmer, a black person who owned his own land, her father, and she's a princess. She takes piano lessons. She dresses up for church on Sunday. They have a very strict behavioral code. They're devout Christians. They are Booker T. Washington-esque in their orientation. And she marries and migrates to Richmond, Virginia, and starts a family in the 1920s. And Scott Davis, the author of this great book, traces her family life through the early 1960s. And what you see for Patience Gromes is her kids struggle. The neighborhood in which is a not wealthy but stable. Her husband works for the railroad. He's got a very good job. Neighborhoods declines. Model cities and various kinds of federal programs come through that end up remaking the community in ways that actually work in an adverse effect. Public housing, which is initiated with the idea that the poor were going to be sheltered, ends up creating ghetto type phenomenon.
Right.
And they're racist,
Yeah. But but conservatives mostly don't, actually. They blame Sharpton. Or I'll speak for myself as a conservative, lifelong. I would always be like, Sharpton's the problem. And it's like, no, I think I'm just really struck, I don't know too much about it, but I'm really struck by the difference. Like, I grew up thinking, Martin Luther King was like a great man. I still think great things about him. And Malcolm X was a really sort of evil figure. But if you listen to Malcolm X, he's a lot closer, with some big differences, but in general to what you're describing as positive.
Correct.
And he got murdered.
And so did King.
How the hell is that funny? How's that funny? These conservatives, boy. But these are the same ones who now trying to say that Malcolm X would have voted for Trump. But you just made fun of this man getting murdered. Because that's funny. To a conservative, a man getting killed is funny. Okay.
He's a lot closer, with some big differences, but in general to what you're describing as positive.
Correct.
And he got murdered.
And so did King. No, I
Like, how is that
have
funny?
respect for the straight-backed, manly, autonomous,
Yes.
independent, responsibility-embracing
Amen.
posture of Malcolm X. You know, he says, nobody is coming to save us. We had better take care of our own. Are you raising your children? Did you pick up the trash in front of your house?
Exactly.
Will you start a business? You don't have wealth. You're waiting with your hand out for somebody to give you wealth. Why don't you start a business? Why don't you take care of your own community? Get busy.
So a year ago.
So Putin might have been right. Tucker might be a plan. This is what we doing. We laughing at Malcolm X getting assassinated. That's what we do. Okay. All right. But then y'all get upset when we say never mind. Never mind.
Even know if it was written by Malcolm X, was written by Alex Haley, but I don't know to what extent it reflected his real views. But then with YouTube, I watched a couple of Malcolm X speeches, and it was like a totally different person from the one I was presented in high school, and much more along the lines of what you just said. And I was like, well, why isn't this guy much more famous than he is now? One of the speeches, he goes off after white liberals, and he's like, whites are bad, whites are a problem, but the real problem is white liberals. And I was like, you go, Malcolm X. Why isn't it almost feels like his message has been suppressed a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a historian, but
Okay, never mind. It's funny you had Tucker laughing at Malcolm X getting assassinated, but he had a problem with people making Ashley Babbitt jokes. Conservatives, y'all can't be sitting up here getting upset that people are making jokes about death, but then you go and you're supposed to be the moral high ground and you go and do the same thing. You can't sit up here and get upset that people are making jokes about Trump getting hit in the air. You look like hypocrites. But the reason why I wanted to play these two things was just to show you that the Grift, I warned y'all, November 5th, the Grift was going to be over. And we're seeing it keep playing out. They're getting rid of all of y'all. They would rather deal with the white Grift than the black Grift because they don't trust you. Mr. Loury, let me explain to you something, because maybe you didn't get this. You're 76 years old. You didn't get this. When the Manhattan Institute picked you up, they knew you could be bought. But here's the problem when you can be bought. They also understand that once you sign your name on that contract, you become a betrayer. Think about it. Any contract you have ever heard of in history, either somebody's let go out of it or they try to break it. What's the first thing they do? They try to besmirch you. This is why people put people on contracts. They understand that that the promise of guaranteed money and prominence in whatever aspect you're in, they understand that at a certain point, either you're going to leave or they're going to have to terminate you. But it's no skin off of them. You're going to take the biggest hit. They knew who you were. They knew who people like Diane Yap were. Your failures in life that needed some visibility. I know that sounds harsh. But you guys are failures. You needed to get on with conservatives to make your BS points sound actually intelligent. How is you as a black man sitting right there listening to Tucker Carlson espouse about Malcolm X and then laugh that he got assassinated and you still sat there for another almost 50 minutes? But before you were espousing about the racism and what they were doing in the 60s. I need that answered from me, sir. This is why we don't like a lot of you black conservatives. Because y'all claim that you want to clean up the communities and you want to be shining examples of what it means to be a black person in this country. And the second you in front of a white person, you be subservient. You hear the BS, but you act like you didn't hear it. And then you get to smiling so you can keep in their good graces so you can continue to get paid. Then you look shocked when you step out of line and you actually think for yourself one day and they don't like it. You automatons you. But I love the fact that all of you are figuring this out now. I love it. Because you can't come back where the real ones are. You guys get to roam and create your own tribe. Well, Torian, he doesn't work for them anymore. They fired him. They didn't renew his contract because he said something about standing with Palestine. And you know, Manhattan Institute don't like that. They pro-Israel all day, every day. Now, he bought himself some cachet because he got to talk to Tucker Carlson. So they ain't going to outwardly cancel this man all the way. Not yet. But it's funny, Mr. Glenn Loury, because we can go look this up, right? Where are your black conservatives to stand with you? I mean, you got released from your contract over there at the Manhattan Institute. I don't see nobody with any clout in a conservative space that happens to be black. I don't see them supporting you. I don't agree. Look, white person. I don't agree with Glenn Loury on Israel and war in Gaza, but to claim he's anti-Semitic is an absurd slur. Disagree with his argument and don't impugn his character. Oh, okay. Thanks, Eli. Immigrants to this country have embraced the challenge of succeeding in America. Jews, Eastern Europeans, Italians, the Irish, they didn't ask for a seat at the table. They took one. They earned their place. That's what it takes. They earned their place. Sir, with all the documented history on all these groups, you really about to say that? Never mind. Never mind. That's too easy. Glenn Greenwald, you'll never ever guess which unauthorized opinion on the Middle East it is that Glenn Loury expressed that caused the Manhattan Institute to fire him. Huh? For decades, conservative think tanks celebrated and supported black economist Glenn Loury, or Loury. Then he expressed an unauthorized opinion on the Middle East and he dropped him in 1 second. Uh-huh. I'm still looking, by the way. Where are the black conservatives on this? And the funny thing is, I've never heard a black conservative that has a big YouTube or social media following ever mention this man. Ever. I honestly did not know this man existed. Hmm. Hmm. His wife, who? LaJean, made him question the mainstream media. Okay. Bless her heart. Oh, by the way, his middle name is Cartman. I bullshit you not. I just thought maybe that little bit of tidbit of information might be relevant to y'all. Hmm. I'm still looking. I don't see no black conservatives. Y'all should be screaming to have this man on. Hmm. Hmm. I'm still looking, by the way. None of them. I think we've proven our point here. Not one big black conservative said, hey, we got you, Glenn. Why don't you come over? Great, Trump rocks. We're not even talking about him, but do your thing. Go ahead. Tell us how Trump rocks. Go ahead. I got a little bit of time. We'll give you 10 minutes. Explain to us how Trump rocks. This should be fun. No, don't run down NorCal. Come on. Tell us how Trump rocks. And then after that, you can tell us how he rolls. You can do that for us. Go ahead. Well, George Golden, remember, these guys are independent YouTubers and content creators and influencers. They shouldn't be worried about somebody taking away their jobs because they don't have any. Remember? The Grift is quite confusing. Remember, this is what they said. They said they do their own thing. I sound like a mad housewife because I asked you a question. Okay, so you're telling me you can't tell me how Trump rocks, but I figured as much. I'm giving you the opportunity to teach, and you're not even. That's the best you got. I guess your wife must scare you every morning because you don't do what she says. I understand. She got the apron on and she hits you with that rolling pin to get out of bed. I get it. The trauma. You need to go see somebody about that. Wow. I'm sure she does hit you. You need to call the police on that. Just because you're a man does not mean you are not adverse to being a victim after you've been accosted. Now, before you call the police, tell us how Trump rocks. It shouldn't be that hard. Come on. And if you tell us a good enough explanation, maybe what we'll do is we'll call the police on your behalf because, black people are very empathetic. So we'll do that for you. You'll have corroborating witnesses because, all y'all say is all we do is lie. So we'll be good. We'll lie for you. We don't want to see you get beat up by a woman. We don't want to see that. They got that in WWE right now. We don't want to see that in real life. Come on. Tell us how Trump rocks. Come on. Should be very easy. Notice nobody's saying anything. They want you to say something. Come on. Should be easy. Very easy. Nothing? Come on. Can't be this hard. Would you like me to help you? We'll start you off because, again, we're empathetic. Maybe if you see his picture, maybe then you'll see something. Look. He got 14 jet fighters when he went to Qatar. Come on. It should spur you. Come on. Don't be like this. Here's a black woman saying that Trump supporters are racist, poorly educated jackasses. They're evil people who voted to destroy the country. Come on. Can't be this hard. Come on, come defend your mans. Anyway, the NBA Western Conference Final starts tonight. And tomorrow the Knicks start the Eastern Conference Finals at home. It's going to be fun. They talking about 20,000 people going to be outside Madison Square Garden in that plaza. Maybe NorCal's calling the police. Maybe we finally gave him some confidence to call police on his housewife. Come on now. Trump's, Obama's, and Bush's medical exams are all easily accessible. Biden says that they covered it. This might be the biggest scandal in modern history. Okay, great. He had cancer. Like we said yesterday, he had cancer. Move on. How does that impact your life? Oh, do y'all want to switch into an RG3 roast session? Because we could do that. I could end this live and just roast him, but maybe we do that tomorrow. We'll do that tomorrow morning. We're going to roast him. Woo! Because we got a lot. Oh, man. And of course, as I just told y'all, when you under their thumb and under contract, it's cool. But the second you say something they don't like, you gone. Let me help your RG3 real fast. We didn't cancel you. White folk did. But we're going to get you tomorrow. We're going to get you right. But, you know. Oh, nothing nor call. I figured as much. I figured. I shouldn't even. I know. I saw the post where y'all said that Canada is bringing down their retaliatory tariffs to almost zero. And y'all was so happy about that, even though you didn't even read the full article. But I expected as much. The devil is in the details. So for those who want the details, Canada did that so their economy don't tank and they can go seek partnerships with other countries to fill that American void. I keep telling y'all, these countries don't need us. But, you know. Y'all will find out in July. I promise you. You're going to find out in July. But anyway, I guess since old boy don't want to say nothing because he can't figure out how Trump rocks or rolls, we're going to leave. Hopefully you learned something. If you did a dumber job. If not, I'll try to be better next time. I know this wasn't a sexy live, but, you know. Bootlicks relenting on why they lost their upward mobility. It's satisfying, but sometimes it's just not. It's just not sexy enough. But tomorrow will be sexy because when he gets cooked tomorrow, we will laugh. So y'all take care, stay safe, and you know what to do when the agents of chaos come to mess up your existence. Well, Red X too, and that's gonna bite us back. But you know, you can go back in my archives. I've already proven how that's gonna bite us back. But anyway.